Okay, now before I show you the last of a couple of Painterly tools, what I'd like to do first is show you how to create shapes using something called paths, which is something we haven't done before. Before I do that, however, what I'd like you to do is look at your history palette over here. And before we do anything else, I'd like to create a snapshot of our image the way it is. So to do that, again, a snapshot in Photoshop in the history panel over here, which is right here, basically lets you preserve your history at an older point in time. So that way, if you run out of history here, you can still go back to a certain step. So to create a new snapshot, all you have to do is go ahead and click Create New Snapshot from here. Click. There you go. Very good. So now you see it says Snapshot 1. And we're going to rely on this during a later technique. So here's what I'm going to show you next. What I'd like you to do is go ahead and look for something called the pen tool in Photoshop. The pen tool is not where the brush or pencil tool is. It's actually quite a different tool. So to find it, you're gonna find a tool that looks like a nib of a pen. So you click, hold down. Now there's a bunch of ones that look very, very similar. Make sure it's called the pen tool. So again, to find the correct tool, you click, hold down until you get to the pen tool. Now, let me show you how this works. First, go ahead and get on the very top layer. So remember, on the last part of the demonstration, we turned our background layer editable by using the background eraser tool. And after we turned it editable, or we turned it from a background lock layer to layer 0, we actually put it up at the top over here, so it's at the very top. So be on that top layer. And now what you're going to do is, before you use your pen tool, look at the top of the options bar up over here. There's a bunch of different options here, and this is how they're essentially going to work. What I want you to do first is click the very first box. You're going to see 3 boxes here. Now, in the pen tool, the third box out of these 3 usually does not work. It's not activated. So with the pen tool, you can only use the first 2 boxes out of these 3. There's a number of options in Photoshop for creating paths. And all of the path creators have the same options, the same 3 boxes here. Just like all the selection tools have the same 4 boxes. So to start with, go ahead and click the very first one. And this one basically creates a new shape layer. So I'll show you how that works. So click the first box there, and then over here you're going to see a bunch of boxes, all of which have different shapes. And the first 2 have 2 different looking pen tools, or 2 different looking pen nibs. Click the first one. This one is essentially the regular pen tool. So one more time, it's the first box here and the first box here as well. Don't worry about the other stuff for now. We'll worry about that later. Okay, now here's what you're going to do. The way that the pen tool works is it doesn't typically work the way that the brush or the pencil tool does. You actually can make, it takes a little bit longer to make a shape, but it makes a much smoother and more detailed shape that you can go in and change later. So here's how that works. What I'll do is I'll zoom in so you can kind of see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing here. There you go. Now the way this works is I click once. So just click once with your pen tool, click, and you'll notice it creates a little tiny dot, right? Now, go ahead, after you click once here, go over to another section to let's say the left-hand side, right where I'm here. Click once and do not let go. I repeat, click once, but don't let go. Click. So I'm holding down. So click and hold. After you click and hold, drag. When you drag, you notice that what happens is this little seesaw comes out. It's like a teeter-totter, whatever you used to calling them. In Photoshop, we call this a handle. Now, when I twist my handle or my teeter-totter, you'll notice that what happens is this shape, the line that I've created actually changes its angle. So I can spin it around, sort of like a pinwheel. So you see, as I spin it around, it goes a different direction. And also, I can make it longer. Now, watch this. If I have it down like this, and I draw it down longer, you'll notice that the curve of this, the curve of the line actually increases. So the length of this increases the curve. As you can see, if I do it this way, it increases the curve, increases the curve. So the length of the line increases or decreases the curve. A short line is a very light curve, and a long line is a very heavy curve. And the direction changes the angle of the curve. So one more time, the direction of the handle, which means like left or right, like this, if I twist it like a pinwheel, the direction of the handle changes the angle of the curve of the line, and the length of the handle changes how hard it curves, or how much it curves. If it's a short line, it curves lightly. If it's a big line, it curves heavily, right? So whenever you get it to a point where that you like, so say I'm going to do it like this. Let go. Just let go. Good. And we can see we're already making a shape. Now let's go ahead and find a new point. Let's go ahead and go over here. Click once, and then hold, right? And you see every time I hold, I create a curve. When you're ready, when you like how your curve looks, let go. Make another mark. Click, drag to pull out your handle. So again, once you click, you drag to pull out your handle. Up here, click, drag to pull out my handle. There we go. Now let's say I don't want a smooth shape, I want like a really tight shape. To do that, all you would do is wherever you click, you just wouldn't pull out your handle. You would just click once and let go. Click. Right? And you see how now, because I didn't drag my handle out, it creates a very sharp line. So if you want to handles create smooth curves, and no handles create sharp curves like this, or indentations like this. So I guess the way to look at it is, a handle creates a curve, no handle creates a corner. Now, to create a handle one more time, when you click, you drag to pull out a handle. If you don't want a handle, when you click, you just don't drag, you just let go right away. Now, when you're done with your shape, you have to, just like a selection, you have to end at the end where you began. So basically, this is the dot where I originally, if you can see over here, this is the dot where I originally started. So you always have to end at your starting point, like a racetrack. So I'm going to click right on top of that dot, click and drag, and I can make a smooth line. There you go. All right, and that's how I created this new shape. Now, if you look over in your layers palette, what you see here is you'll see a color box next to something that says shape 1. The shape 1 is the path. So the thing next to the color is where your paths are. Paths are basically the outline of this that you can manipulate. And the thing next to it is a color. If you want to change the color of this shape, you would double click on this box right here. Click, click, run your layers palette. Double click right over here. And then I can change the shape color, or change the color to, let's say I like something darker like this. I could do that. There you go. Very good. Okay. All right, so the nice thing about this is essentially, for lack of a better word, you can think of this like a smart object. You can always go back in and change it anytime you want. That's the benefit of it. That's why it creates it makes itself on a new layer. So I can always go back in and edit this. Now watch this. If I click, let's see, what would be a good place to start? Okay, look for your path selection tool. It looks like the move tool, but it's not the move tool. The move tool is at the top, and it has a little navigator icon at the bottom right corner. The move tool looks like, I'm sorry, the selection tool, the path selection tool, looks like a regular cursor. It's lower down here. So it's actually located where all your path tools are. The pen is a path tool. The text tool is actually a type of path tool as well. And your shape tools are all path tools as well. So you can notice all these tools are grouped together. Sort of like how all the selection tools are grouped together. Selection tools are the marquee, the lassos, and your magic wand. And let's see, down here, yeah, your painting tools are all together, your illustration tools are all together, and then at the bottom here, your path tools are all together, and there's a bunch of other tools in between, but I'll go over those later. So, the way that you would grab your selection if you wanted to move it, you'd click your path selection tool. Once I click my path selection tool, which is down here, I click on the path, and the path is the outline, so the edge of this shape. Click on it once, and when I do that, you notice what happens is these little dots pop up. Each of these little dots is called an anchor point. So okay, if you're in the ocean and you want to stop at a certain place, you anchor yourself, right? So these are little anchors, these little dots here. These are all the anchors that I created whenever I click. So when I was creating my shape, you will recall I clicked here, I clicked here, I clicked here. And this is where I anchored myself. So I can move the shape around by moving the entire path. So the path selection tool lets you move your entire path around. Now click and hold down on the path selection tool, and you'll notice that another tool pops up. as you can see here. One is called the direct selection tool. So there's the path selection tool, which is black, and then there's the white selection tool, which is called the direct selection tool. It's sort of like Mario and Luigi. They're twins. So you're going to click on the white twin, which is the direct selection tool. And what you're going to do is you can hover over any one of these anchors now and click on one. So let's say I've decided that I want to change this anchor. I don't like how this curve is. I wish I could change this curve. Click on this anchor right here. Click once. Once I click once on this anchor, you'll notice, look what happens. My teeter-totter, or my, the correct word is your, oops, excuse me. Hold on a second. Okay. Sorry. So anyway, this is actually called your handle. My bad. So the handle, both of these handles, you have two of them, will help you again change the shape. So it's sort of like you get to go back and rechange something, or you get to go back and change the angle. That's what I mean. So if I were to click on this, you notice I can shorten. If I shorten the length of one side of my handle here, you see how it changes how much it curves on this one side. If I change the handle length on this side, it'll change how much it curves on that side. You see what I mean? So I get sort of a sharper angle. There you go. And if I make them larger, so now I'm increasing the size of this handle bar over here, it also increases the size of this curve right over here as well. Oops. There you go. Okay. Now I can also twist it to change the angle of this curve. So I can twist it to change the angle. Very nice. Okay. Good. And if I click on this anchor, I can move the anchor around separately. So I can move it up here. I can move it down here. I can do all sorts of things with it, right? Good. All right, so that's just how you move your anchors around. So again, I can click on here, on this anchor, down here, do the same thing, move this around. And again, I'm just changing the path. I can increase the size of the handle to make the curve deeper, and I can twist it to change the angle of the curve if I wanted to. All right, good. And so forth and so forth. Okay. So again, the benefit of creating a shape this way, unlike with the selection tool, unlike with a paintbrush tool, this lets you always go back in and edit the shape whenever you want to, right? So there's a lot of benefits to this. Now, let's say I decide that I want to change the angle of the shape or create an indentation in a different location. But I can't do that because I didn't create an anchor here. Here's how you would add an anchor. Go back to your pen tool for a second and click on your pen tool. Once you click on your pen tool, click and hold down the pen tool until you see this box pop up with a bunch of different options. One is going to say add anchor tool, and one is going to say delete anchor point. So add anchor point, delete anchor point, right? Now, if I click on add anchor point, it looks like the pen tool with a little plus sign on it. So if I move my pen tool around, excuse me, there we go. So again, this is my add anchor point. It looks like the pen tool, but it's got a little plus sign. Now let's say I've decided I want to add an anchor point over here. To do that, first I need to be able to see my path. Once again, if you can't see your path, you go and get your black Mario twin, which is your path selection tool, which will bring that path back up if you click on it. Now I have my add anchor point tool. I'm going to add an anchor right over here where no anchor exists. So click on this path once. Click. When I click on that path once, you'll notice that now another anchor has appeared here. And if I get my direct selection tool, which is the white twin over here, I can now move this anchor around. I can twist, 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 right? Now let's say I've decided that I like this anchor, but I wish I hadn't made this anchor. So I've decided, actually, what would be a good one? Okay, let's try this one over here. So let's say this anchor tool, I decided that I don't like this anchor here. I don't want this anchor to be there. I can delete an anchor if I made too many. To do that, go back to your pen tool, click, hold down, and find your delete anchor point tool. Once your delete anchor point tool is selected, and you'll notice the delete anchor point too, because it has the pen tool with a little minus sign on it. Hover over the anchor and click once, click, and look at that, I've deleted that entire anchor. Okay. Now what I've noticed though is when I've created this, now suddenly I have a very sharp a corner up here, and I don't want that. I want this to be nice and smooth. But to do that, I need to get a my handle out of here. So look at this. You see how I have a handle on one side, but I don't have a handle on the other? Let's pretend like maybe I don't even have a handle at all. So look, if I click on this anchor here, I have no handle at all, right? So this one is missing half of a handle, and this one's missing a handle at all. So I have only half a teeter-totter here, or a seesaw here, and I have 0 here. I need to create a handle if I want to create a curve instead of a corner. To do that, go back to your pen tool, click hold down, and look for the convert point tool, or convert point tool. It looks just like a little triangle that's missing the bottom half. Convert point tool. Click on that, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over this area here. This anchor, if I click on an anchor and start dragging, so you click, hold, and drag on an anchor with your convert point tool, click and drag, look what happens. Now I have 2 handles that pop up, and I can make this much softer. If I decide I want to curve this area, I could do the same thing. I can turn this from a corner into a curve by clicking and dragging, and now look what happens. Now I have a smooth curve, right? All right, let's say I want to undo that. I would go back to my history, undo, there you go. And that's essentially how you can add and delete all of these different anchor points to manipulate them. So again, that's just the benefit of this. You can always add anchor points, delete anchor points, and add handles to create curves, or delete handles if you don't like them, and so forth. Let's see. Let's say that I want to turn this from a curve into a corner. So let's say I don't want this to be curved. I want this to be sharp. Or even over here in this section down here, this anchor right here, let's say I want this to be a corner. I don't want it to be a curve. To do that, again, you just use your convert point tool, which is this little sharp, looks like an arrow kind of thing. You roll over that curve where that anchor is, click over that anchor, and just click once and don't drag. Click. When I click once and don't drag, you see it becomes sharp. If I click once and drag, I get handles. If I click once and don't drag, I get a corner. If I click once and drag, I get handles. And then I get a curve. And that's just essentially how that works. All right. It's looking like a heart. In fact, I'm going to make a heart. Let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and get my direct selection tool against the white one. So if you want to move an anchor, a teeny part of it, if you want to move a little part of it, then like the anchors, then you use your direct selection tool, which is the white one. If you want to move the entire thing around, you get the black one, which is the path selection tool. There you go. And this lets me manipulate this. Pretty neat, huh? Now, sometimes it takes a while for students to get used to how to use this pen tool. Sometimes it kind of bugs them. But the more you practice with it, the more you get used to it. It's actually quite fun to use. And again, it has a lot of benefits. The benefits are if you make a mistake, you can always go back in and change them. So now I've created this beautiful heart, see, out of a shape. Okay, now let's go ahead and get our pen tool again. So go ahead and get your regular pen tool. Click, hold down on where you had your convert point tool, and click get the pen tool. Now I'm going to show you how to create a path that has no color inside of it. To do that, let's first go ahead and open up our paths panel. To find that, it's actually right over here. I have it. If you don't have it, go to Window, Panels. Again, Window Paths. Window, Paths. So it should be right here. And this is your Paths panel. Looks like this. Now you see we already have one shape in here. Now the path is the path section is almost like the layers section, the layers panel, except it's just for paths. And it lets you manipulate them and use them for a bunch of really cool purposes. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom out for a second. All right. Now here's what I'm going to do. After I have my pen tool selected, I'm going to go ahead and click on this middle box over here. So you see these 3 boxes up here? The first one says shaped layers, and the second one says paths. What this essentially means is we're going to create a path that has no separate layer, meaning that it's not going to create a color, it's not going to create a shape, it's just going to create the path. So one more time, it doesn't create the shape with the color inside of it, it just creates the path that we can use to manipulate later. So here's an example, and I'll show you more what I mean. First, let's go ahead and create a new layer so that we can work off of this more clearly. So click on this new layer button, the bottom right corner of your layers panel. It's the button next to the trash can at the bottom. Click on that. And now I have a new layer, very top. And with my pen tool, I'm going to click this middle button out of these three buttons up here at my options bar. The middle one right here. Click right over here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and look at all these boxes over here. I'm going to click this freeform pen tool. Click on freeform pen tool. You'll see two pens over here. One says pen tool, one says freeform pen tool. Click on that one. Okay. Now you can intermix these. So I could create a shape with the freeform pen tool, and I can create a path with the regular pen tool. So I'm just showing you all these different examples, but let me show you. You don't have to only create a path with the freeform pen tool is what I'm saying. You can do different ones. Let me just give you a quick example. If I had the regular pen tool selected, I can still create this path, as you can see. I don't know if it's hard for you to see from far away, but this is just the regular pen tool. So see, I can click, drag, and I'm using anchors, as you can tell, to create this. All right. So now you notice it doesn't fill with a color because it's not a shape, it's just a path, right? So let me go ahead and step backwards for a bit. There you go. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to use the freeform pen tool up here. And when you use your freeform pen tool, just go ahead and create any kind of shape you want. Let's go ahead and do a... let's see, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and create a leaf shape, something more complicated. Ooh, there we go. So I've created this kind of badly drawn leaf shape. Now you notice, once again, it doesn't fill. It just creates a path. I can see my path. I can't see it on the layers over here, but I can see it in the paths panel up here. There's my path, this little leaf shape that I created. It's right up there. All right, now the nice thing about this is I can actually fill my path after the fact. So I can manipulate my path in a bunch of different ways. So watch this. Let's say I'm going to go over here to my color picker, and I'm going to go ahead and click, I don't know, get like a pale yellow color. I'll click on that. So I've created a yellow color. In my paths panel over here, look at the very first button. The first button, it looks like a circle that's been filled with a color. If I click on this, it says fill path with foreground color. Click once. Oops. Oh, I see what I did. Hold on. Back up. My bad. I had the opposite thing selected. Okay, so when you're gonna create, I had minus selection. Look at these four boxes. I didn't do my slots. I didn't check how I was using my tool before I used it. That was my mistake. So see these four boxes up here? I should have had add to path selected. I did not. So click on add to path out of these four boxes. Now you'll notice these four boxes look very similar to the four boxes, the add to selection, subtract from selection boxes that you saw with your selection tools before, like your lasso. They do very similar things, but they're not exactly the same. But essentially, they do add to what you're drawing, or they subtract from what you're drawing. And I'll show you how that works in just a bit. For now, go ahead and click on add to path. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create my leaf shape one more time. Now I have add to path selected. There we go. There we go. So now if I look at my work path, the inside is white and the outside's black. That's what I want. Whatever's white is what's inside of this path. So now if I click on this box, there you go. That's what I wanted. So it fills in the selection. See? Now that is a neat effect. What I did earlier is if you actually want to fill something outside of the path, then you would just use subtract from path to create your path and then fill it, because it would fill the opposite. But to create a path that you want to fill on the inside of the path, you would do add to selection over here. So let me show you that one more time. So again, if I do subtract from selection and I create another leaf shape. So this is subtract from selection. Actually, it's not really a leaf shape. I don't know what that shape is. Let me see. Try again. Let's just make a circle. Make it easy. Sort of like a dumpling shape. If I have subtract from selection and I fill it, okay, nothing's going to happen now because I already have a shape going. Hold on. My bad. Try again. Okay, so now I have no selections. I have subtract from selection started on this one. I'm going to create a dumpling. Look over here. When I created this dumpling, when I first created this shape with subtract from selection to start with, you'll notice the outside's white, the inside's black. That's what I did. So I created the outside is the inside of the path. If that makes any sense, because I did it the opposite way. I did it from subtract. So that's what I did earlier. If I do it the opposite way, again, if I have add to selection started and I create my leaf shape with add to selection, over here in the path box up here, you'll see the outside's black and the inside's white, and now I fill it. And that's basically how you can create a shape with your path. Now, here's the other nice thing that you can do. I can stroke a path, meaning I can add a brush stroke around a path. So first, let's pick on our brush. So go to click on your brush. Click on your brush tool. Go up here to your brushes up here. And let's find a neat brush. Let's go, I don't know, let's try a leaf brush or some sort of textury looking brush. Maybe a leaf or some other thing. Once I do that, I can set the flow, I can set the opacity. Let's say the flow is going to be 0, what have you. I can pick a color, so let's say I want it to be like bright or something like that. Pale green, there you go. Now what I can do is see the second box over here in my path panel, right over here. Second box says stroke path with a brush, right? Click on that. All right, and look what happens on the inside of here. Look at that. It created these leafy stroke all around the edges here. If I wanted it darker, I could bring the flow back up to make it heavier. So I could bring the flow back up to 100% if I wanted to. And do it a second time. And look at that. Isn't that neat? I could fill the inside. Very cool. Now you'll notice over here on this left hand side, I don't have the color box over here. See on the layer I created, it actually has this green shape on the inside, but it doesn't look like this. That is because the path for this is being recorded up in here, but the color is not editable unless I manually change the color by using the path panel. It's not going to be editable. So I repeat. If you have, let me show you one more time. If I have the pen tool going and I have my first box selected to create a shape layer, it creates the shape layer here, which has all my editable properties here. If I click the second box up here, which just creates a path, the second box up here in my options bar, then it creates all the information in the paths panel instead of the layers panel. So one more time, the first box creates a layer that has your path information. The second box creates a path that has all your information in the paths panel instead. What you have to do here in this case is you would have to actually go in and alter the colors manually by clicking on the boxes, these little icons down here in the paths panel. So if I wanted to change the color, I'd have to actually do it here. Let's say like change this to dark green, for example. I'd have to actually change it here and so forth and so forth. All right, so now I have this neat shape. Kind of neat, huh? All right. Now, if I want to move this entire path over, one more time, to select a path, you go to your path selection tool, which is the Blackmire twin over here, the two down here, black path, and then I can move the path itself. See, so I'm moving just the path. If I want to move this shape, I would use my move tool. Does that make sense? If you zoom in, the path selection tool, which is this one down here, moves the path. The move tool moves the actual shape or the color you've created using that path. So the nice thing about this is if I go back to this path again, so now I'm going to go back and select this path again, I can now fill it again and do a stroke around it again with, I can get my brush. First get your brush tool selected and then make the stroke. So your brush tool has to be selected before you make your stroke, because you have to actually get your brush selected first. So I can create like a grass effect now and do that. See? Or let's see, let's undo. I'm going to do the leaf again, I like that leaf. Or even stars. Let me see what the stars look like. Yeah, I like the stars. I like the leaf more. I'll go to the leaf. There you go. So see how that works? So I can create multiple shapes. It's almost like creating, you know, like Shepard Fairey or Banksy. It's almost like you're creating your own stencil that you can use over and over again. So the path lets you basically create multiple shapes. Now right now I created both these shapes on the same layer. If I wanted to create them separately, I would create a new layer every time I made this. So again, always make sure you're checking what layer you're working off of. So if they're moving together, that means I created them both on the same layer. If I wanted to create them separately, before I went to fill that path, I would have to create a new layer and then fill the path. So I could fill the path on multiple different layers to move them all separately, as you can see. Very cool. Okay, so I'm going to move my path one more time. Again, get my path selection tool so I can move this path. Move this over here a little bit more. Okay. Get my brush tool one more time so I create a stroke. I'm going to create like a spray painterly kind of stroke. Let's see. Sort of like a yellow effect. Create a stroke around here. So again, I create just the stroke and I can fill it. And then if I move tool, I can move everything separately. See? So again, this just gives me the chance to create multiple things with the same path. Now, there are other things that this path actually does. So watch this. I can turn a path into a selection, and I can turn a selection into a path. So let's say I've decided, so I'm going to zoom out for a second. Let's say that I've decided that I want to cut out a piece of this layer. See this layer on top? I want to cut out a piece of this so I can see through to more of this neat pinky effect below, right? Which is this. So I have this pinky effect below, and I want to cut it out on the top so I can see below it in this shape, right? Here's how I could do that. I would go to my selection. So I have my selection. To move my selection over where I want to print it, I would click on, again, the path selection tool, the black wire twin, so I can move this around. Let's just say I'm going to move it down here for now. I don't really care where I have it. I'm just going to move it around here. Very good. I can transform a path. So let's say I decide this is too big for me. What I could do is I can go to Edit, Free Transform Path, Edit, Free Transform Path, or Transform Path Scale. Free Transform Path lets you transform your path in multiple different ways. Transform Path Scale lets you just change the size. If I click on that, I'm going to hold down Shift on my keyboard so I don't skew my shape. Let me show you what this means. If I zoom in, whenever you hit transform, a shortcut is Command T on your keyboard. Command T. Whenever I transform something, if I hold down Shift on my keyboard, I go to the corner of this box. See the bounding box pops up? This is your bounding box. If I hold down Shift and click on a corner and drag it, you'll notice that I can shrink the or increase the size of this path as much as I want to, right? And it doesn't skew. It always stays proportional. So when you hold down Shift, when you use the transform bounding box, so one more time, when you hold down Shift as you use the transform bounding box, it scales things proportionally. So it increases the size or decreases the size proportionally. Now watch this. If I let go of Shift, and now I do it, look at this. Now it skews it all over the place and makes it's not proportional anymore. It's like I can make it thin, or I can make it fat, or I can make it squat. I can make it do all sorts of different shapes, right? Now the nice thing about paths, unlike shapes, unlike regular shapes that are made out of pixels, paths are smart. So that what that means is they're basically vectors. Vectors, I can increase the size as much as I want, and they're never going to get pixely because they're created out of math. So it'll always create it, whatever size it'll always smooth out those lines, and they'll never become pixely, right? So I'm going to make a small leaf over here. When you're done with your transform box, you either hit the check marks up here. See the check mark? Click on that. Very good. Or you can just hit return or enter on your keyboard. Okay. So now I have this path here. I'm going to actually turn this path into a selection. To do that, first I'm going to go ahead and, let's see what would be a good way. Yeah. Let's do it this way. So look over here on your path panel up here. This is your path panel again. Look for the third box. It looks like a circle with a dotted line. If you roll over, it says load path as a selection. Load path as a selection. I'm going to click on that. Click. When I click on that, look what happens to my path. It turned into a selection. So now I'm going to delete this selection from layer 0. To do that, you have to actually be on layer 0 first, so which is this layer on top here. So I'm hiding this stuff that I just created, and I'm looking at this. So I want to click on this layer that I'm looking at, which is essentially this one in this case. I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to delete on my keyboard. Delete. Look at that. I deleted it. So now I have a deleted shape right here. So I just deleted that shape, and I can see through now to the bottom, right over here. Okay? Very, very good. Okay. Now, to undo your selection, do Command D. So one more time, to undo your selection, do Command D or select, deselect. Command D is D for deselect. Now let's say I've decided I want to create another one of these. To do that, go up to where your work path is, find your work path, which is right up here. Click on it once. All right. And get your selection, path selection tool, and I can move it. So I clicked on my work path, I got my Black Mario Twin black selection tool, path selection tool, click on that, and look at this, I still have my path. So I can do this as much as I want to, if I wanted to. So I can click over here. And I can do the same thing now. So I can go ahead and load path as selection, and I can delete again, you see? So this path lets me preserve a selection. So if I ever want to use a selection, I can use a selection as many times as I want to. It's actually quite easy. And look how fun that is. So I can always go around and make more shapes, and I can go around and make more selections. So I've created multiple shapes with the same path, and I've created multiple selections with the same path. Now, let's say I've created a selection, but I want to turn the selection into a path. What would I do? That's pretty easy. So watch this. I'm going to get my magic wand tool. So I'm going to get my magic wand tool. Check your options. I'm going to click on, let's say this shape right here. To do that, if you see, if I click on it right now, it doesn't select anything. It's going to select something else. That's because I'm on the wrong layer, right? So if I undo, I need to make sure I'm on the correct layer before I select. So again, I keep going into slots, which are just making sure that you, slots just means that you make sure you're checking all your options before you click on anything. So let's do this again. I'm going to go to the very top layer in my layers panel. Once I'm on that top layer, and I know I'm there, if I get my magic wand tool and I click on it now look at that. Now I've clicked on the thing that I actually want. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this into a path. To do that, look at your path tool, your path panel. You'll see the fourth box here. If I roll, you'll see it looks like a path that has anchors and has handles on them, your teeter-totters. Roll over that. I see it says make work path from selection. Click on that. There you go. Once I click on that, I can go and get my selection tool, again my black selection tool or my path selection tool over here, and I click and drag, and look at that. I actually have a path. It has a lot of anchors on it because it's very shapely. So let me go down here. All right, you see this? So I turned this selection into a path, and I can save this path to use for later. I can also manipulate it. So let's say I decide I don't like it. I can click and hold down and get my white direct selection tool. Click on anchor, and look at this. I can move the anchor around. Oops, it's not letting me do it. Ah, there it is. There you go. Okay. So I click and drag. Do another one. Click and drag. See what I'm doing here? So this is with a pre-existing. Giving me a hard time going here. There we go. Okay, so basically what I'm looking for is the handles. I can move the handles around, just like so. Very good. Alright, and then what I could do is I can go in and fill this. Let's see. Go ahead and fill this with maybe another, let's try maybe a pink color. Click OK. Fill that. Alright, if I zoom out, look at that. I've created a shape now. And I can get my move tool and move that shape around. Alright, you see how that works? This just helps me create a hard shape instead of this feathery shape over here. So again, anytime you create a selection, you can turn your selection into a shape, right? Which is kind of fun. Alright. Now the last thing I'm going to show you, let me go ahead and zoom out for a second. Let's say I've decided that I really like this shape up here, this sort of inky looking thing, covering up my heart a bit. Let me move my heart around here. There you go. Okay. So let's say I like this shape over here, and I want to turn this shape, or I like this imprint that I created. This it's actually this. If you look at it, I like this, and I want to turn this into a shape that I can use over and over again. Here's how I would do that. I would first click on this layer, so make sure you're on the right layer. This appears on this layer. If you're not sure what where something is in your layers, just hide your layers until you find it. So if I hide all my layers, and the only one that I have left is this one, then I know it's on layer 1. If I hide that, well, you can actually see the path there that I created. If I hide it, I realize, oh, okay, so I must have accidentally hid the. So it must be on this one, layer 0. So I'm going to create a path out of this. So I'm on layer 0. I'm on my background layer where I have this shape. I am now going to get my, what would be an easy way of doing this? Okay, I'm going to get my magic wand tool again. So I'm going to get my magic wand tool, and I'm going to click in here. Click. With my magic wand tool. So now when I click in here with my magic wand tool, I stole this shape. See, I filled this area. It looks like this. So I filled that. So after I filled this, my magic wand with my magic wand tool, I can now go to my work path, and I can click on this. It says make work path from selection. Again, it's in my paths panel. It's the third. It's a button basically in the not in the middle. It's the fourth button from the left. If I click on that, click, and I get my path selection tool, I can move this over, and look at that. I now have another shape. I can go to layer 4, which is where all my shapes are, the very, very top, layer 4, where all my shapes are. And I can go ahead and fill that. But to fill my path, it's this button right here, the very first one, in my paths panel. Click on that. And look at that, I filled that. And what I could also do is I could give myself an outline. So to give myself an outline, I first have to get my brush tool selected. Find a nice brush, maybe a leaf pattern, and then click this second button right here in my paths panel. Second button again creates a brush stroke, a stroke around your path. There you go. And now with my move tool, I can move this shape around. See? And with my path selection tool, one more time, the black one, I can always click on this path, move it over, and create another imprint. So like I'm Shepard Fairey. It's like a stencil. I can go around and use my stencil as much as I want to now. All right. Very, very good. Okay. Now, another way to steal a selection, let me find one more way I can show you. Let's find... Okay. So I'm going to go back to this for a second. This is layer 0. Click on layer 0, the layer that has all these imprints on it. Let's say I decide that I want to steal this. But I just want the outline of it. I don't want the entire thing. So I just want the outline or the silhouette. I don't want to select everything like the magic wand did. Here's another option. Go ahead and click on your pen tool. So get your pen tool one more time. So get your pen tool. Got my pen tool right here. Once I get my pen tool, I'm going to go ahead and select path. So the 3 boxes here, select path. Right? I'm going to then select freeform pen tool, which is the second pen over here. Second pen over here. All right, and you'll see that again, there's all these little boxes up here. Looking for the second one, freeform pen tool. Now, once I click that, look for where it says magnetic. You see where it says magnetic? Go ahead and click on that once. The magnetic pen tool is a lot like the magnetic lasso. It finds an edge and tries to stick to that edge. So let me show you how this works. If I'm over here on this shape, don't want to zoom out too far. Okay. If I click and start dragging around this edge, I'm going to like trace this. You'll notice it tries to magnetically stick itself to the edge of this shape, right? And that's essentially how the freeform pen tool works when you have magnetic on. It's a lot like the magnetic lasso, except it creates a path. The benefit of this is the magnetic lasso can only create one shape once, or one selection once, whereas the magnetic pen tool lets you create a path or a shape that you can use multiple times over, like a stencil. So that's the benefit. So this path is reusable. The selections aren't reusable. When you're done, double click, and now you see I have a path here. And again, I can fill this path if I wanted to, and you can see it's more of a silhouette of the path. It doesn't have the stuff on the inside like the magnetic tool did. There we go. Like the magic wand did. So now, if I undo this, edit, undo. Here's the other thing. Once I create a path, I can turn this path into a selection one more time. So again, I can click on this middle button right here, load path as a selection, the third button over in my path panel, and look at that, I can turn this into a selection. And if I turn it into a selection, I can start painting on the inside with my paintbrush if I wanted to, and bring everything back. Kind of neat, right? So see, I'm just kind of painting on the inside of this. See? That just gives you more and more options to work with your paths. Again, when I'm done, Command D to deselect on my keyboard, Command D to deselect on your keyboard, or select deselect to stop. And I'm going to zoom out. Look at all this stuff I've done. Okay. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you, let me go ahead and go to a new layer. Let's create a, actually, let's not create a new layer yet. I'm going to show you one more thing. Alright, so I've showed you how to create custom paths, right, with the pen tool. The pen tool creates custom paths. Now let me show you how to create pre-existing paths. To do that, look for your shape tools. Your shape tools are located over here. You're either going to see a rectangle, a rounded rectangle, a pentagon, a line, or a custom shape, which looks like a blob. If you're familiar with Pokemon, it looks like Ditto from Pokemon. That's the shape. So, look for that. If I click on rectangle tool, it does just what you would expect to do. It creates a rectangle. Before I use it though, let's go ahead and go up here to my options bar, and you'll notice that this is a selection tool. I know it's a selection tool. It's a rectangle tool because it has all the same options as the pen tool did. So if I go ahead and click on the first box will create a layer with all my path information, right? And now I can pick a color for it if I wanted to. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a box. Pretty simple, right? Now you'll notice because I have the first box out of these three selected, it created a layer over here called Shape 2 that has all my layer information there. So I can just double click on this to change the color if I wanted to. As you can see, yada yada yada, right? Okay. Let's decide that this isn't what I want to actually create a very special path out of this that's square shaped but has multiple square shapes inside of it and so forth. I'll show you what I mean in a second. Here's what I'm going to do. So go ahead and go to Shape 2 and delete it right here. Delete that by just clicking delete on your keyboard or the trash button at the bottom right corner of the layers panel. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new layer. To create a new layer, click on the create new layer button again next to the trash can, or you can go to the top right corner of the layers panel and click new layer. It's going to ask you what to call it. You can just call it other shapes. Okay, there you go. Alright, so whatever you name it doesn't really matter. I just want you to see how this works. So now I have a new layer created. So I'm going to create all my new path shapes on this layer. So now if I get my shape tool, so let's say I'm going to create a rectangle tool. So I have a rectangle tool selected. In these three boxes up here, click the middle one. The middle one is called paths. Again, we talked about this before. The first one is called shape tools, or I'm sorry, shaped layers. It creates a layer that has all your path information, and the middle one just creates the path, which is going to be in the path panel itself. So what's going to happen is this. I'm going to create a selection. So let's do this over here so you guys can see it. Zoom in. Alright, so I'm going to create a square. So I've created this square shape. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for these four boxes up here. I'm not going to go over all of them with you, but let's just focus on these first two. The first two, these four boxes, do what you would expect. The first one says add to path area with a plus sign. So I'm going to create another path that overlaps while this is selected. Click on that. I'm going to create another one. Click on that. Now you notice they don't blend together the way that the selection tools do, like the lasso tool or the marquee tools. But that's okay. It's still adding. So there you go. So now I've created all these additions around the corner of this. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the second box, which is subtract from path area with a minus sign. Click on that. Click on that. Minus sign. Now you see that I have a little minus sign on my tool. I'm going to click a shape in the center, click a shape in here, click a shape in here, and so forth, and so forth. Right. Okay. So now if you look at this, I have what looks like just a bunch of crazy shapes together. Some I added, some I subtracted. Now watch this. If I go to my work path over here, I can go ahead and fill it. So click on the fill button just like we did before. Fill path with foreground color, which is right here in my path panel. Click on that and look what happens. Even though you see these lines where the paths are, some of them are fill paths and some of them are subtraction paths. Let me phrase it. Some of them are addition paths and some of them are subtraction paths. So in total it creates this shape. I can still do the same thing I did before. I can add an outline to this. So I get my brush tool, add an outline. So again, you have to push your brush tool first before you add a stroke around the edge. There you go. Actually, let me make a smoother line. Let me see what would be good. There you go. Click on that one. There you go. I like that. It's a bit marker-y. Let me try another one. What would be a good one? Yeah, they're all okay. Butterflies. Well, if it's a butterfly outline, I'm just changing my stroke around. It's like a house. I'm going to shrink the diameter. To increase or decrease the stroke, you just change the diameter. So I'm shrinking the diameter here. Or I could do the brackets on my keyboard again. Right bracket makes it bigger, like this. Left bracket makes it smaller. So I'm going to make it tinier. And once I make it tinier, then I'm going to hit the outline. And you see it comes out smaller like this. There we go. Okay. I can also, again, turn this into a selection. If I click on Load Selection, you see it loads a selection for me. And if I had a selection, I can click on the one over here to turn it back into a path. And so forth, and so forth. Now, you can do this with multiple shapes. Let me click and hold down. There are circles, there are lines. The line tool just creates a straight line path. So if I click on the line tool, click and hold down the line tool, I can select a weight for it. The weight just determines how many pixels wide it is. I can click on Add. I'll show you, actually, this actually might be a good opportunity for me to show you, let me see, yeah. This would be a good opportunity for me to show you how this, this third box works. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer. So I'm going to create a new layer up here, just another one on top. This is just a demo layer. If I zoom out, here's what the line tool does. Okay, now the line tool will create a path. Let me show you. That is actually, depending on how many pixels I have up here in the weight. So see how I have 7 pixels in weight. So that means the width is going to be like 7 pixels across. So I can fill this with a color. I can give it an outline. I can make it a selection, just like I did before. You see, it's almost like a very, very, very thin rectangle is a good way of thinking that. A very thin and long rectangle. Undo Command D. But you can see how this works, right? So it just creates a line that's very, very straight that matches, that I can do all the same effects to as I did with this shape over here. So I'll show you one more time. If I increase the weight and I make this, I don't know, 20 pixels, and I click and drag, you see that it just becomes thicker. This path does. And I can fill it, add an outline to it, do all those kinds of things, and so forth and so forth. I get my brush, make this bigger, make an outline around it. Woohoo, look at that. So this is just a very easy way to make borders if I wanted to, as you can see. Shrink this a little bit more, make an outline. Oops, my bad. There you go. And so forth, and so forth, and so forth. So, good. Okay, now there are other options with this tool. Here's what I was going to show you. If I click on this Fill Pixels tool, see where it says Fill Pixels right here? Now this third box is available. Now note, this third box was not available with the regular pen tool. Remember how I said it was hidden? You saw all three of them. With the pen tool, only these two were available to use. With the shapes tool, all three are available to use. This is why. The paths tool over here creates a path. This third one actually doesn't really create a path. It just creates a bitmap. So I know it's a little bit confusing because all these tools are path tools, but there's a way to create a shape without making it a path. So I repeat, there's a way to create a shape without you making a path for it, and that is by having this third box filled. If I have this third box filled and I click on this, you'll notice what happens is it creates a shape with no path. If I look at my paths over here, it's not there. There's no path for this. If I look at my layers panel, there's no layer with path information. This is pathless. Cancel. Sorry. This is pathless, meaning that this is basically a bitmap. It's created out of pixels. The disadvantage, the disadvantage of creating this out of pixels is that I can't go back and edit it. It's stuck to the layer. So I can move it around, but it's like a picture of this path. I can't change it. It's stuck. The other paths I can go back and edit anytime I want to because they're smart. I can go back and change them. They're basically made out of vectors. Well, sort of. They're smart. Think of it that way. They're smart. These ones are not. So if I have, this is just a bitmap or a image made out of pixels, right? Now, the benefit of a bitmap, though, is that I can apply all sorts of effects to them. So I can use my blur tool or my smudge tool on it, for example, if I wanted to. So I can go over and smudge this if I felt like smudging it, you see, and so forth and so forth. So the benefit of making a shape out of pixels is that I can manipulate them using more tools. I can't really manipulate this heart shape that I created. Let me go back to where the heart is. Pardon me. Here's my heart shape. If I move this over so you can see it better. This one, you'll notice if I get my smudge tool and I try to move it over, I get this cross sign. It says, no, you can't do this. I can't manipulate this because a lot of these tools, like the smudge tool, works by using pixels. It manipulates pixels. Filters work by manipulating pixels. Smudge tools work by manipulating pixels. I can't manipulate pixels on this because it's not made out of pixels. It's made out of, for lack of a better word, it's made out of math. So I can't create it. It's a path. However, a shape that's not a path, I can manipulate just fine. Okay, so for example, once I create this path for this shape over here, this shape was a path, but once I use my move tool and I move it away, oops, excuse me, other one, there you go. See, now I can move this away, and once I move it away, you'll notice that this path stays here, but the shape is here. So this is now actually created out of pixels, so I can manipulate this one. This one just has a path that goes along with it. Okay. So again, these are just different things that you can do. Just to reiterate the difference, let me show you the difference one last time. These three boxes. The first one creates a layer, a smart object, that has all the path information stored in one section. Because it's smart and it's all together, I can't manipulate the pixels on it. This middle button creates a separate path. It doesn't appear here in the layers, it appears here in the paths panel. But I can use this path to make imprints of pixels, sort of like spray painting a stencil. So my stencil, I can't manipulate the stencil. See, this is my stencil right here. I don't know if you can see, but this path, these lines that are very hard to see, this is my path. I can't manipulate my path by using like the smudge tool or a filter, but I can manipulate the stencil that this path creates by filling or doing all these things to it, because the filling that it creates is made out of pixels. And lastly, the third box completely bypasses creating a path at all, and it just creates that shape in one clean go out of pixels, which is this one up here. And as you can see, there is no hard to see lines anywhere. There's no path for this one at all. It just creates the stencil without the stencil. So it creates the pixel shape, but it can only create it once. So again, the middle box, I create a stencil so I can create these pixel imprints as many times as I want, like a stencil. The third box can create the pixel imprint, but it can only do it one time. And that's it. All right, so that's essentially how you can work with paths. Now, let me show you this custom shape tool. Custom shape tool, again, I can click over here and select it from here where it says custom shape from the toolbar, or I can go to the very top of my options bar and click on the ditto shape up there. Either way will give me my custom shape tool. Custom shape tool, if I click over here, you'll see I get a blotch. This thing drops out if I click on this, and I can pick a bunch of different shapes. So if I wanted to pick, let's say this checkerboard pattern or whatever, I zoom out. I'm going to pick, I'm going to create a path out of this. So to create a path, because I want to create a stencil out of this, I'm going to create a new layer again. Bear with me, and I'm creating a lot of layers with you guys. Create a new layer. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a path over here by having new selection. I'm sorry, add to path selected. I have my shape selected, and I have the middle of these three selected, which is create a path of these three buttons here. Click and drag. And now look at this. I have this interesting work path. What I'm going to do with this work path is I am going to fill it with, let's try like a faded color like this. Click OK. I'm going to fill it. Filled it. I can do a stroke around the edge of it if I wanted to. It's going to take a while because it's a big edge. Oh, I forgot to click my paintbrush first. Click my paintbrush. Get my strokes ready to go. I had my flower last time. There you go. Got my flower. Decide the size is good. Click on this. Add a stroke around the edge. Look at that. Pretty cool, huh? There you go. Now, if I decide that okay, so let's say I decide I want to change the size of this. Once again, if you want to change the size of this and you want to scale it, you do Command T for transform. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. That is going to get my path. What I need to do is select the layer first. My bad. So I just selected the path. I could warp it if I wanted to. Nah, I'm not going to do that. I'll do this later. Basically, if you're wondering, when I hit Command T, let's say, click on your path first. Go ahead and click on your path. Right now it's being difficult. There you go. Click on your path up here, which is in your path panel. Click on that. And do Command T on your keyboard, or go ahead and go to Edit Transform, Free Transform Path, or Transform Path Scale, whatever one. Select Free Transform Path. That's probably going to be the better one. So Edit Free Transform Path. You'll notice the boundary box pops up around this path here, right? What I was going to show you just while I'm at it, I hadn't planned on showing you this, but I think it's a neat effect, so I'll go ahead and stop to show you this. See where it says switch between free transform and warp? Right now I'm on freeze transform. Let's say I want to warp this. Click on this button up here, and I get like a grid shape that pops up. I know it's hard to see from where you are, but you get this grid shape that pops up. And when I can do this grid shape is wherever I click on this grid shape, if I find these little circles, look for the little circles around the edge. A little circle, like a dot around the edge, like right over here. If I click and drag, I can actually warp this, my path, kind of like this. So I can just warp this shape all over the place. There we go. This is a cool way to create like banner effects and so forth. Very neat. So you see I'm just warping how this is shaped. Once I do that, let's say I decide I'm going to get rid of this layer. So I'm going to go to layer 6. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to click check mark. Click your check mark when you're done. Click your check mark when you're done, or click enter. Go to layer 6, the layer or whatever layer you have at the top here, where we created this pattern. I'm going to delete that. Oops, my bad, I deleted the path, my bad. Edit, undo. Actually, you know what, before I do this, let's create a new layer on top. Just create a new layer right on top. I'll delete this layer later. Create a new layer right on top. A new layer right on top by clicking on this button right next to the trash can. And I'm going to fill this now, the warped one. There we go. Look how different this is now. See how that's warped? And I can do my, I can get my brush and make. There you go. Very cool. Okay. Now that that's done, I'm going to go ahead and go to layer 6 and delete. So I'm going to go to the layer underneath and delete it. So instead I have this one. There you go. So I deleted the path first, and then I deleted the layer. All right. And now I have this neat effect. Oops, I have to be on the layer first to move it. There we go. Cool, cool. So I created a custom shape, and then I warped my custom shape path to give me something like this. All right, I can also on this layer go to opacity. Over on this layer, go to opacity and reduce the opacity to make it lighter if I wanted to. Very neat. All right. Okay. So essentially, that's pretty much the, yeah, so I've showed you the pen tool and the freeform pen tool. Again, the freeform pen tool is up here in the options bar. Another way to get to it is in the toolbar. Click, hold down, you'll see the freeform pen tool here as well. But we already showed you how to use that shape. So yeah, so basically that's pretty much how you work with paths. There is another way to create a path, and that's actually your text tool over here, your text tool. However, I'm going to show you how to create text separately later, so I'll go into that another time. But that's how you create paths. So again, the benefit of paths, unlike selections, are that selections you can only use once. Paths are like stencils. You can use them more than one time, and you can edit them after the fact, which is also a very nice effect. Both selection tools and paths have different benefits. For example, selection tools like the magic wand, for instance, will let you select things based on pixels, and paths won't let you do that. So they all have different purposes. It's really up to you to decide what purpose is best for what you need. But yeah, that's essentially how you use them. So just to reiterate one more time, in your path panel over here, you can find your paths. You can fill the paths with this button, the very first one. You can give a stroke or a brush outline to your path. To do that, you have to make sure you press the brush button first, the brush tool first, and then click on it. You can turn a path into a selection to do things to it, like paint inside of it with a brush if I wanted to, like I did down here in this section over here. I can take a selection that I've created with my magic wand or my lasso tool or my marquee tool, and I can turn that actually into a path over here if I wanted to. And I can even transform my path by going to Edit Transform, Scale, or Edit Free Transform. And if I go to Edit Free Transform or shortcut Command T, I can also click on this warp button up here that will allow me to warp it in addition to transforming the size. To transform the size, you hold down Shift on your keyboard to keep it scaling proportionally, and yada yada and yada yada. So when you're done with transforming something, click the check mark. If you don't want to transform something, you would click the X box up here. And that's it. So that's all I can pretty much think about for paths. If you have any questions, let me know. But that's essentially how you use Photoshop paths. Now, before we move on, what I'd like you to do now is go ahead and create another snapshot. So go to your history panel over here. History panel. Click on the snapshot button next to the trash can. Click. And now I have two snapshots. Snapshot 1 and snapshot 2. Save both of these. All right. I'm going to move my path box back up here. And that's it. Okay, now as promised, I'm going to go ahead and show you two last illustration tools that are actually pretty fun to use. To use these illustration tools, what you're first going to need to get out is your history panel. I know this is a weird panel to get out for illustration, but you'll see what it does later. Now, your history panel, if you don't find it, go ahead and go to Window History. Again, that's Window History. There you go. Excellent. Okay. And now remember, as before, we made some snapshots here. So we have snapshot 1 and snapshot 2, right? And we have a bunch of a history down here. Now, the first tool I'm going to show you is something called the History Brush tool. So you're going to find your History Brush tool. It should be underneath the stamping looking tool over here. It's not the regular brush. If you can't find it, click and hold down until you find it, and you'll see it says History Brush tool, just like this. Okay, now here's essentially what the History Brush tool does. It lets you basically paint old history, or it's almost like it lets you paint a stroke that undoes things up to a certain step. I know that sounds weird, but let me show you how that works. So once you first pick your History Brush tool, go ahead and pick a different brush up here. So up here where the brush is, click on that. And let's go ahead and pick, I don't really know what brush to pick. Maybe I'll just go ahead and pick another leaf brush. So I'll pick a leaf brush for now. Alright, so I have my leaf brush right here. Now, essentially, here's how this works. you'll see these little boxes that are next to all of your history, including the snapshots up here. You're going to click on snapshot 1. You want to click at one at a time. You can click on the snapshot like here, or you can click on one of the history sections down here. The easiest way to do it is through snapshots, so that's why I recommend typically doing snapshots. So go to snapshot 1, the very first one we took before. Click on that one and have it selected to Art History Brush. So it says sets the source for the Art History Brush, or for the History Brush, excuse me. Okay, now here's how this works. Go to your layers palette for a second just so you can see stuff. So I'm going to hide everything on the top up to this point. So I'm hiding everything that I had here all the way up down to this point. This is our background layer. Now it was our background layer, but again, it got renamed to layer 0. Now here's what we did. On this layer, what we did before is, remember how we cut out these sections? Oops, excuse me. Give it a second to load. We cut out these leaf shape patterns. You remember that? So right now we can see below them. So we can see this below this because these are all cut out, as you can see. This section we also painted inside of a selection that we created with a path. So as you can see from here, we have this section right over here that we painted on top of. Now, thing to note, the history brush will only let you undo certain steps that happen to the layer that you're on. So it won't let me undo steps on any other layer except the layer that I'm on. So the two steps that I did, the two things that I did on this layer since the last time I took this snapshot was, again, I cut out these two shapes here and I painted inside of the selection with the path tool. I did both these things onto this layer. And so if I have snapshot 1 selected, snapshot 1 was created before I did any of these two things. It's almost like you're setting things in your time machine. When you create a snapshot, you create like a marker. I don't know how many of you guys play video games, but it's sort of like you do a save point in a video game. So you do a save point so you can always go back to that one point in the video game. That's the idea of a snapshot. So what's going to happen is I'm going to erase everything that I did, or I can erase parts of what I did in a brush stroke up to that last save point before I made this, before I did this. So before I did these cutouts, before I did these this painting inside this selection on this layer. Again, I can't do anything else other than what I did on this layer. Okay, so after we got that cleared away, I'm going to take my brush. Again, I have a leaf brush, and I have this selected. I'm going to snapshot 1 selected. I'm going to go ahead and start painting. Now look what just happened. If you zoom in here, I basically undid what I did here. What I did here before the what I did after snapshot 1 was taken was I created a cutout. So I'm undoing the cutout in the form of a brush stroke. Does that make sense? See? Also over here, what I did after snapshot 1 was taken, which is what I have selected. After snapshot 1 was taken, which is what I have selected on this layer, I filled this with a paintbrush. I filled the selection that I created from this path. I'm going to unfill the selection. See what I did? All right. And it just essentially lets you undo all those things. Now I could also go back in a section. Let me see. Let's say if I go to snapshot 2. I'm going to select snapshot 2 now. Snapshot 2 basically was taken after I painted this. So snapshot 1 was taken before I painted inside the selection. Snapshot 2 was taken after I painted. So if I click on snapshot 2 and I roll over with my history brush, it'll start adding this stuff back because it'll make it look like how it looked at that point in history. So I repeat, it'll make this look inside the brush stroke how it looked at that point in history. So at this point in history, snapshot 1, it looked like it didn't have any filling, so it'll do that. Snapshot 2, if I select snapshot 2 and I paint over it, it'll look like how it did at snapshot 2, which is when I did have the filling, and so forth and so forth. Right here and right here. Same thing down over here in this section. At snapshot 2, I had these cut out. So if I start painting here, they start cutting out. Snapshot 1 was before I had them cut out, so I'll start painting as it looked when it was at snapshot 2. and so forth and so forth. I could also select a certain point in history to do that, although I've used my history brush so much now that I don't really have much history to go into, so I'll ignore that for now. But just to know, these are an option too. You can go back to a certain point in history in the history panel. Otherwise, snapshots are probably your best bet because it lets you more clearly see with these little snapshot pictures right here, these little tiny icons. It lets you more clearly see what you're actually painting. Now, it only works, again, at a certain point in history. So, if I go to layer 7, don't know if I could use it here. If I try snapshot, yeah, I don't think I could use it. Again, it'll only let you do what you did to a certain layer, whatever layer that you're on. So let me see. Yeah, that won't let me do anything. Yeah, these are all paths that I created, so I can't really do anything there because I didn't make any changes to them. Trying to think. Yeah, you see, the thing is, I can paint on this layer. This is my other background layer, but if I have snapshot 1, that's the furthest I can go back, and it already looked like this when it was at snapshot 1, so you're not going to see any changes. The only thing that changed between snapshot 1 and snapshot 2, the only changes that were made were on this particular layer, which is the background layer. So that's why it only affects this layer. But it's kind of a cool effect because now, as you can see, I can see all this stuff underneath with all these imprint shapes. It's kind of fun. Okay. And that's basically how the history brush works. The history brush lets you paint a stroke, and inside of that stroke, it'll look like how it did at whatever point in history you have it selected for that layer. So snapshot 1, one more time. Snapshot 1, which is the one I created before. Snapshot 1 I created before I made these cutout shapes. So if I paint inside of these areas over here, oops, excuse me, again, it'll paint how it looked. So if I fill the entire thing, you can see I can paint over. At snapshot 1, this is how it looked in this area. It didn't have a cutout, right? However, at snapshot 2 was taken after I did have that cutout. See? And so if I paint now, it'll just paint that point of history. And that's just essentially how it works. Same thing here. Snapshot 1 was before I filled this, so I can delete it, delete everything inside this fill. Snapshot 1 was after that point in history. And I can re-add all of these things. And so forth and so forth. All right, and that's the history brush works. Now, the next brush I'm going to show you is called the art history brush. The art history brush, it's fun to use, but be forewarned, it's hard to control. Pretty much the only time you would use this is if you're just going to create a neat painterly effect. So click and hold down your history brush and look for the art history brush. So once again, click and hold down your history brush and look for your art history brush. Once I click on my art history brush, I'm going to go ahead and click a soft round brush like this. Have opacity at 100%, have area at around 10 pixels is fine, and have dab selected for style. Have dab selected. Tolerance, I'm going to bring that up to like 10% as well. All right. We know what tolerance is. Area is just the size. Style is how it paints, and I'll show you how that looks in a second. All right, so let's start on this one. Let's see. Now, basically, the art history brush will create a painterly effect based on some point in history. So if I go to snapshot 1, so again, I have to select snapshot 1. So I clicked my, I got my art history brush selected. Then I got, I selected a brush style, and then I went ahead to my history panel and I selected snapshot 1, which was before a lot of this stuff was done. So it's going to basically affect areas that I have changed in the past. Let me zoom in here. Now, as you can see here, in this area, it kind of blends in, but it doesn't create like an exact brush stroke. It just kind of creates this weird painterly effect. And you'll also notice, even on areas, like look over these areas over here. See this painterly effect? It just kind of creates like a random painterly effect based on that point in history. And it's hard to control, so don't try to, like, you can't really control it easily. It just kind of creates this weird blending effect. Let me show you. Like, okay, let's go over on this area over here. See what I mean? It's not easy to control. It just kind of creates like a weird blending effect. One thing I like it for, though, is it does create, it's almost like, how to put this, it kind of creates like a star kind of pattern, like a starry sky kind of pattern, which is actually quite fun to look at. So as you can see, I'm painting on top of the top layer right now. There you go. So if I paint on top of the top layer, you see kind of pops up this little kind of starry look. Oops, excuse me. I'm just going to keep painting. I'm going to hide this layer and start painting on top of this layer a bit. Again, it just kind of does weird things that are hard to control, because it's kind of like a time warp. Think of it that way. It's like a time warp, but in a brush form. If I change it from style, actually, let me try one more shape. Let me change the brush up here to like a, I don't know, like a leaf brush or something, and see how this one looks. Alright, this is interesting. So you can see it just kind of creates these weird effects. They're very light. Interesting. So there's all these little areas. So it does different things. If I roll over that here, you see it does different things based on different parts of the image that you paint on. Over here, if I paint on this, it turns it white. I think that's because in the history, we cut out this area. So it's turning it white. Over here in this area, we had it filled with the color. So if I paint over this, it's not white. It's actually like a, more of a, the darker look, as you can see. Like, look at this. So it just kind of creates a weird brush stroke based on whatever happened to this part on this layer in history, based on the snapshot you picked on. There we go, and so forth. So it's kind of a neat look. Let's see. So I'm going to change this from dab to tight curl. Tight curl long. Let's try tight curl long. When I do tight curl long, look what happens to it now. It creates like this weird longy looking swirl. You see? And again, it'll affect different parts differently. That's interesting about it. It just affects different parts differently based on what happened there in history, based on the snapshot that you're on. Again, I'm not going to make you memorize this section. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of a neat section on its own. There we go. And I can do tight curls. I can do tight long. Let me see what this one does. Yeah. There's all sorts of weird effects. And I'm going to go ahead and reduce the opacity of this one a little bit so we can see stuff underneath it more. Bring some stuff back on top. And so forth and so forth. So this is what I did with it. Okay, now the last thing I'm going to show you for this design is something called filters. Now, filters will affect certain things differently. Filters can't affect smart objects. So, for example, if I go to this heart shape over here, so I'm on my heart shape, shape 1, in the layers panel right over here. If I go to that and I go to filter, you'll notice a bunch of my filters don't come up. That's because I have to rasterize this first. I have to flatten this shape. There are two ways to rasterize a smart object. The first is by going to layer rasterize. So I can go to layer rasterize shape, or smart objects. I'm sorry, actually, layer rasterize shape is the easiest. Go to layer rasterize shape. When I do that, you'll look over here, you see it'll change from being a smart object or a path to being a bitmap, which means an image made out of pixels instead of a path, or instead of a vector. So rasterize, layer, rasterize, shape. There you go. So you see now it's just a shape. It does. It's a bitmap. It's not made out of a path anymore. The path is gone. As a result of that, I should be able to do more effects to it. More filters. Now, here's a problem though. Right now, if I'm going to add a filter to this, a filter will only add a filter to one layer that's visible. So right now, this is the only thing that's visible. The problem that I have with this, if you'll notice that a bunch of my filters aren't showing up. That's because it's a solid color. See how it's a solid color like this? In order for it to do much, I have to add noise to it first. So keep in mind, some filters require noise to be used first before they'll actually affect anything. So here's what I mean by that. Go to filter and then go to noise. Filter, noise. Remember, I actually mentioned noise earlier, but I didn't have an example to use, so now I have an example to show you what noise is. So go to filter, noise, add noise. One more time, let's go to filter, noise, add noise. Filter, noise, add noise. When I do that, you can see it previews what it does here. So it's kind of like, remember I mentioned before, noise is kind of like a jittering something. When we talked about brushes, it's like jittering something, but you're jittering the pixel colors themselves. So see, if I jitter it a lot, it turns out like this. You see? And the pixel colors become more and more further away from what it originally looked like. Yeah, and so forth. Let's just do uniform distribution. Uniform distribution. Monochromatic should be off. Don't have monochromatic on. And let's just add a little bit of noise. We don't want to take away, add so much noise that the color gets messed up of the entire thing. We're just going to add a little bit. So add like maybe, I don't know, 16% to 20% noise. There we go. And if you can't see it, if you have preview on, you'll be able to see it that way. Okay. So again, the way that this works pretty simply is just noise basically jitters the individual pixel color, meaning it makes the individual pixel colors like a little bit random away from the other pixel colors. So if I click OK and I zoom in, here's what noise does. It's kind of like a bad television screen. You know those bad, when a television screen gets all funky looking, it kind of gets this look, right? It's like a bad feed or a bad image. That's what it is. So just basically all these pixel colors became jittered. They became randomized. There you go. They're all randomized. So one more time, a little bit of vocabulary words. Noise, jitters pixels. Jitters means that, again, jittering something means that it changes at random. So it jitters the pixel colors, meaning it changes the pixel colors at random. In this case, though, the less jittering you have, the less noise you have, the more it preserves some of the pixel colors. So you can still tell at the very least the overall image is red. Toggling means that you jitter something back and forth between two options only, so it's not at random. So if I toggle, like for example, my color over here in my color picker, if I go up to the top right corner where the little bendy arrow is, I can toggle back and forth between two things. So it's not at random. You're switching between two things, but not at random. Jittering, you're switching between things, a big number of things at random. And let's see, lastly, rasterize means that you turn an image that's smart, that has a path or a vector, and you're turning that smart object into a bitmap, meaning it's made out of pixels now. It's no longer made out of math. Now it's made out of pixels. The benefit of that is once something's rasterized, you can add more effects to it. So remember before, I couldn't use my smudge tool because it was a path. Now look what happens. I can use my smudge tool now. See how I'm smudging it? So I can use my smudge tool now because now it's rasterized. It's made out of pixels, right? So that's the benefit of pixels, is if an image is rasterized and made out of pixels, the benefit is you can use a lot of more Photoshop effects on it. The downside of making an image out of pixels is that you can no longer go back and edit it at any time like you could when it was smart. So for example, if I wanted to go back and change the color of this heart, I can't do it anymore because it's been flattened, it's been rasterized. Now it's made out of pixels. Okay, so let's see. Right now it's just loading because I used blur a little, or I used the smudge tool a little bit too much, so I'm just going to let it do that for a bit. The thing that I'm going to show you next are called filters. So while it's loading, I'll explain filters. Filters essentially are, how to put this? They're sort of like actions, pre-made actions in Photoshop that manipulate pixels to using mathematical components. So it manipulates pixels using mathematical components to create certain really neat effects. Filters, if I show, okay, so that's done now. Let me show you. If I do undo smudge, I'm undoing the smudge tool. I just did that to show you. Now I'm going to go to filter, and now I should be able to add more neat effects. So let's go ahead and go to, let's try, It looks like there's not enough information in this heart to add some of these effects, like the artistic effects, but that's okay. We can still add other things. Let me try a pixelate one, or perhaps a render. Render filters add certain things like clouds or lens flares. Not all of those are options right now, though. Solarize, okay. Click on any filter you want to. Oops, didn't open it up. Undo, undo. Let's see, what would be a good filter? Okay, there it is. All right, here's what I was looking for earlier. If I go to filter, look for convert for smart filters. Convert for smart filters. Click on that. Okay, it's going to turn it into a smart object. Click OK. So I'm turning this back into a smart object, but it's a smart object that no longer has a path. So if you look over here on this side, you see how you get this little icon, the bottom right corner of your shape 1 with this heart. Now if I go to filters, let me see, I should be able to use more of these. It's still being difficult with me. That's okay though. I can still try different effects with it. So let's see. I can try all these different effects on my try ridges. This shows me what I can do with it. I want to preview it, which is a little bit hard for me to do. There it is. Now I can preview. So if I zoom out of this and I zoom back in, I can kind of see more closely what I would do to it. Let me see. There you go. So I'm just filtering this. I'm rippling it, basically. Alright, that's pretty cool. Okay. And you see my smart filter appeared up here. Okay. Alright, so now here's what I've decided. Alright. Now as you notice, I can use a filter to affect one image only. There we go. So I've used it to affect the heart only. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a filter on top of pretty much my entire image. So to do that, let's go ahead and we're actually going to flatten this image. Before I do, let me show you how to flatten an image safely. So I'm going to take out my layers panel so you can see what I'm about to do. There are different ways to merge layers together. Once you merge a layer or you flatten a layer, you can no longer undo you can't split layers, you can only flatten them together or merge them. Once you merge them or flatten them, you can't undo what you did. So it's a bit of a dangerous step to make. So let's say I want to add a filter to this entire thing. Before I do that, let me show you an example of how to merge layers. So I'm going to click on this very, very top layer up here that has this image on it. Let me show you. This is my very top layer. So if I have my move tool, you see this move is moved separately. The layer underneath it is this image, which you see I can move these separately if I wanted to, right? Now, I have to do that by moving this. There you go, so I can move it separately. Okay, now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to flatten these together. So I'm going to do that by clicking on the top layer. You see these are both visible. And I click on the top right corner of my layers panel, and I can click merge down. Merge down. If I click merge down, it'll merge the top one to the one right below it. So it'll merge this one to the one right below it. And now you see they're all merged together. So now they're all part of one layer. That's how you merge more than one layer together. Another way to do it is to merge visible layers. So if I make this layer visible and this layer visible, but the other layers I hide. So I hide all the other layers. So you don't see any eyeballs except for the two at the very top up here. These ones have eyeballs, the rest don't. So these are the only two that are visible. Top right corner over here of the layers panel, I can click on that and then I can go merge visible. If I merge visible, it'll only merge the two that are visible, which will merge these two together. So, and if I have 5 that are visible, it'll merge all 5 that are visible, and so forth and so forth. Okay. Now another way to do that is I can specify a layer. So I can they have to be visible for me to see them. But let's say that I have 3 layers visible, but I only want to merge the top 2, these 2. I don't want to merge the one that's visible here. What I could do in this case is select more than one layer at a time. Here's how you do that. So let me show you. I'm actually going to make a bunch of layers visible. Okay. So a bunch of these are visible now. Now watch this. One way to select a separate layer is to hold down Command on your keyboard and click one layer at the same time. So if you hold down Command, you see how layer 5 is light blue, so it's lit up. If I click on that and then I click the a shape below it, not the one right immediately below it, but the one like underneath it here, you'll see how what it does is it selects those two at the same time, but not the one in the middle. So I've made a sandwich. So I have layer 5, layer 4, and shape 1 in this case. If you have something different, that's okay. Go to layer 5, hold down Command, and click on shape 1. There you go. And you see how both of these two are now selected, but layer 4 isn't. So if I go to the top right corner now, over here, top right corner of my layers panel, I click merge layers. It'll only merge those that are selected. So if I click merge layers, click. Now look what happens. It merged both those, but it left layer 4 alone. So let me show you that one more time. Layer 4 in this case is between the two. It's between layer 5 and shape 1 in this case. If I merge those, because they're selected and layer 4 is not selected, layer 4 is left alone, but now layer 5 got all merged together, as you can see. So my heart got merged together in this case, and everything else did. Now here's another trick. If let's say I move this layer up here, layer 2. Don't worry, I'm just showing you what this does. You don't have to do exactly what I'm doing. But right now I have this shape, okay? But let's just say I'm going to put this on top or something. I'll leave it below. Okay. All right, so I have this shape together here. Now watch this. If I click on the top layer and I hold down Shift instead, so I hold down Shift instead, I click on the very top layer and I hold down Shift and click on the layer 2. Notice I'm not clicking on layer 4. I'm clicking on layer 2. But I click on it and look what happens. They all get selected. So if I want to select all of my layers, here's an easy way to select all your layers. Click on the very top one, hold down Shift, and click on the very bottom one, and they all get selected. Click on the top one, hold down Shift, click on the middle one, and all of them get selected up to that point. See how that works? One more time. Top one, hold down Shift, bottom one, they all get selected. Top one, hold down Shift, middle one, and they all get selected up to that point. Hold down Command instead, so not Shift, hold down Command instead, and I can click random ones at random to select specific ones. So one more time, holding down Command and clicking on layers lets you select specific layers. Holding down Shift as you click on layers will only let you select all layers up to a certain point. See, like this. Oops, cancel. All right. So I can click on layer 5 and layer 2. I have them all selected. Top right corner, I can go to layers panel, top right corner, and then click merge layers. There you go. And now they're all merged into this one, including layer 4, because they were all selected. Very, very good. All right, now let's say I want to merge all of these layers together into one piece. Here's how you do that. Go to the top right corner. Very good. And go ahead and go to flatten image. Be forewarned, flatten image will flatten everything, right? So here's what I'm going to do. Before I do that, let's say that I'm going to flatten my image, but I'm really hesitant. See, I've merged all these together, but let's say I don't really feel like I want to merge all of this stuff yet, right? These effects, maybe I want to go back in and change my layers later. I want to make some changes. If that's the case, if I flatten my image, I can't undo anything. See, once it's flattened, if I click OK, and I flatten it, it's going to get all stuck together in a background layer, and I can't change it anymore. Oh no, I could not complete this request because my layer is locked. Oh no. I still want to flatten it so I can add a filter to everything, but I don't want to mess up these old layers. So what do? Here's what you do. I'm going to first duplicate all my layers. So I'm going to duplicate everything here. To do that, click on the first layer, layer 5, hold down Shift, and click on the bottom layer. Now they're all selected. So I have all these layers selected. Now I'm going to click and drag. And look, you see what happens when I click and drag? I'm dragging all the layers that I've selected. Drag all of these layers to the new layer button down here next to the trash can. I repeat, after you select all your layers, click and drag them to the new layer button next to the trash can. Other option is you can click up here and top right corner and click duplicate layers. Here's your other option, top right corner, duplicate layers. Just click OK, doesn't matter what you name them. There you go. Now before you click anything else, don't click anything else yet, you'll notice it duplicated all my layers. The duplicated layers will say copy at the end. See, it says layer 5 copy, layer 0 copy, my eraser brushes copy. All these say copy at the end. The ones down here don't. Right now they're already selected for me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put them into a group. So here's how I put all of these into a group. To put them into a group, I'm going to go ahead, click and drag to the folder button. See this folder button right here? It's the third button from the trash can, or the second button from the trash can, I should say. It looks just like a folder. Click on that, and look what happens. They all went plop into this group. Now you don't see them anymore, but they're still there. You see this little arrow next to the folder button that says group 1, the little arrow? Click on that, and you see they're all dropped down. So they're still in there. They're in there. They're just hidden. So now I can organize my layers easier. Now if I click on group 1, I double click on the name group 1, I can rename it backups. So in case I mess up. So these are my backups. Now what I'm going to do is instead of flattening it, again, if I flatten it, it'll flatten everything, including my folder. See, my folder is gone. So here's an easy way to flatten it without actually flattening the entire image. Because again, if I go to flatten image, top right corner, whoops, excuse me. If I go to the top right corner and flatten image, it'll flatten everything, including my folders. You typically don't want to do this unless you're really, really confident that you're not going to go back and make changes. So a better way is, I copied all my layers, added them to a folder. See? I can always go back and add something else to a folder. Let's say I duplicate this layer. I can make 2 copies. I can click on one layer, drag it to the new layer button down here, and now I have 2 copies. See, I have my eraser brushes copy. I can put something in a folder by dragging this layer, click and drag this layer into the folder up here, into backups, pop. And now it's in there. See, now I have 2 of them. And I can rearrange. I can click and drag a layer, click and drag a layer together, click and drag a layer underneath. I can do whatever I want to the layers inside of here, right? But now they're all hidden inside. So I'm going to hide backups. So see the eyeball right here? See where the eyeball is for backups? You'll see there's an eyeball next to the folder. Click on the eyeball, so now it's hidden. You can't tell it's hidden because they look exactly the same. But don't worry about that. We'll figure that out later. Just hide it. All right. The only thing that's visible now is everything that's not inside the folder. Everything that's not inside the folder is now visible. So I collapse my folder, hid it, and I hid my folder by clicking on the eyeball, and everything else that's not the folder is visible. So I repeat, everything that's not the folder is visible. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top right corner here, top right corner of my layers panel, and I'm going to go ahead, oh, actually I have to select them first, my bad. There we go. I was clicked on the backups layer, which was hidden, so it didn't give me those options. See how it didn't give me those options? It didn't give me flatten or merge visible. I have to actually click on a visible layer first. Click on a visible layer first, and then click on the top right corner, and now I can merge visible. So click on merge visible. Now they're all merged into one. All right, so now I have all my work merged together. But that's okay, because I always have my backups here. If I need to go back and get those folders, I can go back and get them, right? In my backups folder. Okay. So now be on this layer, whatever layer it's called, be on the layer that got merged together. So I'm going to rename this my merged up layer. Merged up layer. All right. Here's my merged up layer, just so you guys can see. Now I'm going to go to filter, and let's go ahead and start by adding noise to it. So I'm going to add noise to this. Very, very good. Alright, add a little bit of noise. Again, some filters will only work if you put noise to it, especially if it's a solid color. This isn't a solid color, so it should work okay, but I'm going to try. Actually, you know what? Let me try something really quickly. Now, Photoshop typically works with 2 different types of objects. That's a smart object, which is usually a vector, or a bitmap. Now, I've talked a little bit about the difference between vectors and bitmaps. Vectors are created using math, meaning that they never pixelate. You can always go back and edit them, and you can increase them to a very large scale without them getting sort of squarish. Bitmaps, on the other hand, are created using pixels, which are those tiny little square dots you see on your screen. If you create a bitmap at a very large size, you will see some pixelation, and that's the main difference between the two. However, what I want you to now see is how this actually works when you're using them in Photoshop, and what are the advantage and the disadvantage of both. So In Photoshop, you have 4 different types of smart objects that you use most often. Smart objects usually come from another vector-based program like Illustrator that are imported into Photoshop. 2 is the text tool, which is the most common types of vectors that you're mostly going to see. 3, shapes. Any type of shape that you create using the shape tool is usually also a vector or a smart object. And then lastly, any shape created with a pen tool is also usually a vector or smart object, meaning it's editable. The opposite would be the paintbrush tool or the pencil tool, which creates a bitmap or creates imagery using pixels. So here's an example. Let's say I create a piece of text. I'm going to create the letter T using my text tool. This is an example of how you might see a text when it's in Photoshop. Now, I use clay here because this is the best way for me to explain it. When you create a smart object in Photoshop, it basically looks like clay. It works like clay. Clay, unless of course the clay is hardened, is always editable. I mean, you can go back in and change it. That's the point of a smart object. Smart objects can always be changed. So let's say I create this T, but I want to go back in and edit it. Because it's a smart object, I can go back in, I can change it. I can change the font style. I can make it cursive. So I can go back and manipulate it. If it's something I created with a pen tool, I can go back in and change the paths. The paths are always editable, and so forth. Now you can tell something's a smart object because if I look at it in my layers palette, I'm not going to see the transparent pixels or that little grid. What I'm going to see instead is the actual letter T. If I see the actual letter T, or any other shape instead of these transparent pixels, what that means is that is a smart object, meaning I can go back in and change it. So I can always go back in and change my smart objects. I can make this from the letter T to the letter A. I can make it bold. I can make it underlined. I can make it again in italics. I can change the font. I can do whatever I want to. Change the size of it. All that kind of things I can do without having to worry about anything. However, creating something to be a bitmap creates it using pixels. Here's an example of the exact same letter, but as a bitmap. A bitmap is like creating something out of marker or ink. So if I create this out of ink, in this case, then this I can't change. It's basically a picture. So a bitmap is like a photograph of the smart object. So I can't change this. I can manipulate this one. I can't manipulate this one. I can't change it to an A anymore. It's stuck. It's basically like a photograph of this. Now you might ask, well, if this can always be changed and this can't, why would you ever want to make text a bitmap? The answer is most of Photoshop's tools can only be applied to things that have pixels. So for example, if I want to create a filter on this, if I want to blur it with the blur tool, most of these Photoshop tools and most of these menu items and so forth will only work if this object is made out of pixels, because they work using pixels, they manipulate pixels. If the object does not have pixels because it's a smart object and it's made out of math, then none of these tools will work. So let's say that I want to, for example, take my paintbrush and I want to lock transparent pixels and paint onto my text. It won't work because it's a smart object. I can only do that if I turn it into a bitmap. The way you do that is by rasterizing something. So again, this is our bitmap. This is my smart object, which is typically a vector. And if I want to turn this into this, I'm going to have to do something called rasterize it. Rasterizing a smart object turns it flat, meaning it turns it into a bitmap. So once I'm done getting my text exactly the way I want it, I can go up to my menu item and I can rasterize my text, which turns it into this bitmap here. Now, there are other objects, there are other times when you want to rasterize something or flatten it. The way that you would do that is if you had a layer that had layer effects on it, if my layer has certain layer effects on it, I can't manipulate those layer effects because they're smart. They're basically built out of math, is the way of looking at it. So if I try to use like a filter on a layer that has all of my little layer effects on it, then what's going to happen is nothing. It's not going to affect any of those that imagery. So what I have to do first is I have to rasterize that layer or flatten it to make it a photograph or a bitmap of its original form. So to do that, you'd want to do one of two things. If it's text or something of that, or a smart object like a shape, then I can go up to the menu item and I can rasterize it. If that doesn't work, then another way to rasterize something is by flattening that layer. So what I could do is I can create a new layer. So I create a new layer on top of it that's just a blank layer, blank transparency, and then I can merge down. So I can go to my menu items and I can, in my layers palette here, my layers panel, and I can merge those two. If I merge a smart object with another layer or a smart object with another bitmap, it turns into a bitmap. So you can, the idea is you can always turn a smart object into a bitmap. You can never turn a bitmap into a smart object unless you're in another program like Illustrator. So keep that in mind. Once you turn your smart object, your vector or your text into a bitmap, it can't be undone. It's basically stuck that way. So what you have to do is, and this is what I usually recommend, is duplicate your layer. So duplicate any smart object you have before you rasterize it, and just hide that layer, and then just use the duplicate version and then rasterize that one. And then what I can do is I can always go back and I can manipulate this using different Photoshop tools at this point that only affect pixels, like filters, for example. So again, this is the main difference between a smart object and a bitmap. They both have pros and cons. Smart objects can always be changed. I can always go back in and manipulate them, but I can't apply a lot of Photoshop tools to them. Unfortunately, I can't apply filters to them. I can't apply a lot of things to them. Bitmaps, in turn, have the disadvantage of not being manipulative. I can't go back in and change it. It's like a photograph of this. I can't change it. I can't change the text from like an A, I can't make it bold anymore, I can't change it in that way, but I can manipulate the image by using things like filters and so forth on it. So again, to do that, you have to rasterize it or flatten the layer. Both of that will turn it into a bitmap. And it can't be undone. So you can always go this way, you can't go that way. So just make sure you duplicate your layer before you do that. And that's the primary difference between a smart object and a bitmap. This can also be done with shapes. It can also be done with smart objects you take in from other programs like Illustrator, and it can be done with shapes created out of the pen tool. You can rasterize all of those things, but you can't bring them back to their original smart object form when you do. So just keep that in mind.